Morning. My name is Guneet, and today we are going to be talking about the SAT and the ACT exams. The idea here is to largely understand a high school student's journey from grade 9 to grade 12 and how these exams fit into their academic path, right? So in this webinar, you will learn the main things that you as students and as parents need to plan and prepare for during the college admissions journey. And then we'll do a little deep dive into these two exams, the SAT and the ACT, and we'll show you how we at ReWiser can help you along with the tools that we have built, right? So about us, a little bit about us. ReWiser is a high school learning support company. We assist students, worldwide to help them achieve their academic goals. We work with students as early as grade 8 and work with them all the way up to grade 12. We largely help them in two major areas. The first one being test prep, where we help coach them for their SATs, ACTs, APs, IELTS, etc. And the second, of course, is the academic tutoring, where we provide coaching for students for Cambridge, which is IGCSE, AS and A levels, and the IB board. So, and what I'm talking about here is subject tutoring, maths, physics, chem, bio, all of the academics. We have been in this space for over 8 years now, and we work with more than 4,500 families and parents, over the last 8 years. And currently, we have students from across 8+ countries. We have offices in Gurgaon, but we are headquartered out of Bangalore. And right now, we are largely an online company. All right. So let's try and understand the undergraduate college admissions abroad versus India, right? Why do students need to take the SAT or the ACT at all? So the US school system is very similar to our state board, the PU system that we have in India. They have a core curriculum, which is defined by the education board. And each state can choose how they want to conduct that curriculum, right? So this results in varying levels of expertise in each subject, making it very difficult for universities to judge a student's caliber, right? They don't have, they don't have a standardized national exam like we do in India. We have CBSE or the ICSE where everyone writes the same paper. So when we say 98% in maths, every college knows what that means, right? So therefore, what happened was that the universities in the US needed to even the playing field, right? So they collaborated with two companies, namely the College Board, which conducts the SAT, and another company called ACT.org, which conducts the ACT exam. Now, both of these are not-for-profit organizations, and they designed these two exams, these two tests, where students are assessed in math and English. The aim being that every student should know at least this much English and this much math. And this in terms kind of, it helped the universities assess a student's ability to take on a college level course. How well you score on these tests will ascertain which courses are you eligible for. In India, we have very clear cutoff scores, right? So if you get 99.9% in your 12th, you get into, say, Stephens for a particular course. If you get less than that, you don't get it. In the US, there are no clear cutoff scores, right? But they have indicative scores, for various courses and various universities. So, for example, if you're planning to, do engineering in Georgia Tech, right? You need to be within a certain score range for your SATs, right? But for another course in Georgia Tech, you might get accepted at a much lower course also. So it is with a much lower SAT score also for another course within Georgia Tech. So it's very specific to every university, and it's very specific to which course you're taking in that university, right? Okay, so let's talk about, when colleges are looking at your applications for admissions, what are they looking at? There are 4 key areas that they look at, right? First of all, they consider your academics. Foreign colleges and universities are really interested in your overall academic performance. Whereas in India, colleges are mainly interested in your 12th grade final board exam result, right? International colleges will look at your grades from class 9, 10, 11th, and 12th, right? They'll be looking at your overall academic performance over 4 years, right? So this means you need to start focusing early on your academics because colleges are, they're looking to see how you've grown and how you've improved over the years. The second thing that they look at, the second key area that they look at is your standardized test scores, which basically means if you're in India, excuse me, if you're in India, like we have these competitive exams specific to the field that you're interested in, right? So if you're planning to study engineering, you'll write your JEE. If you're planning to take medicine, you'll write NEET. For law, it's CLAT, and so on. That's how it works in India. But outside of India, it's a bit different. They've got this one standardized test, the SAT or the ACT. And it's not like you have to pick one based on your major, right? You can go for either of these tests. Again, you don't have to take them both. So whether you're planning to study economics or finance or engineering, medicine, biochemistry, you are still taking that one single exam, the SAT or the ACT. The other thing that colleges really pay a lot of attention to is your profile. Now, what do we mean by profile? It's basically how you show the college who you are as a person and what, major, the area of study you're really interested in pursuing. So let's say you're keen on computer science as your major. Now you have to work your way back from there and figure out how to prove to the college that you're truly passionate about computer science. I mean, you don't want them to think you're doing it just because your friends and parents said so, right? So profile building is essentially a way for you to demonstrate to the college that you're a perfect match for a specific major for that particular college, right? So there are lots of ways to do that. I mean, you could write research papers, you could start blogs, get involved in the community service, create an app, take an internship. I mean, the possibilities are endless when it comes to showcasing your fit for a particular program or the institute that you're eyeing, right? Colleges are interested in seeing your extracurricular involvement related to your intended field of study, right? So that's very important as well, and that's what we call profile. The fourth aspect is the college admissions, the application process. This will include various things like shortlisting of your universities, completing applications, writing a lot of essays, obtaining letters of recommendation and all of that. But the most critical part of your application process will be your essays, right? Now, beyond your test scores and beyond your grades, the essay provides a window into your personality, your passions, aspirations, right? This offers you a platform to share your experiences, your challenges, your goals that shape your unique identity, who you really are. The essays humanize your application, and it allows the admission officers to kind of connect with you on a personal level, right? So your essays are an opportunity to stand out, and make a lasting impression, to demonstrate your potential contribution to the campus community. So invest time and effort into crafting, these compelling narratives that, authentically reflect who you are, right? So those are the four key areas, right? Now, let's see where do these, let's look at it, look at the standardized tests and how they fit into your high school journey, right? So, of course, academics is something that you're going to be doing all through, your grade 9, 10, 11, and 12, right? Again, profile development also happens across these 4 years. In your 9th grade, you could start preparing for your PSATs. This usually continues well into your grade 10 as well. You also write your PSAT in grade 10, right? You could start your English preparation in grade 10 itself for your SATs or the ACT if you're planning to take that. Grade 11 is when we recommend that you actually write your SAT or your ACT. You will do your prep and then you will write that. Also, of course, if you're if you're a US citizen, in your grade 11, October of your grade 11, you should write your PSAT NMSQT, right? And usually students who are planning to write the APs for college admission processes, then you would write that towards the end of grade 11. So you prep in grade 11 for your APs if you're planning to put those in with your applications. A lot of students continue with their SAT and ACT prep in grade 12, usually for their second attempt. And you write your SAT in your second attempt as well. Of course, 12th grade, 11th grade onwards, of course, the end of 11th grade and 12th grade, you should largely keep for your college application process. And of course, after the end of 12th, your college freshman year begins. So if you look at it, for the focus of our today's conversation is going to be on writing the SAT and the ACT. Okay. So let's try and do a deep dive into the SAT test. This is going to be the core for our today's webinar. Okay, now the SAT exam is conducted 7 times in a year. So we've just had the May exam, yesterday. So there is a session that happens once in March. There's a session in May. There's an exam in May. Then June, August, October, November, and December, right? So 7 times a year. The ACT also happens 7 times a year. And candidates are permitted to take the exam multiple times, right? But we will advise you not to take it more than twice. Colleges, again, have varying preferences when it comes to standardized test scores, right? Some universities will require all applicants to submit all of their scores. So if they've written 2 tries, 3 tries, they might ask you to submit, every test that you've taken, your entire score. Some will allow you to super score. That basically means that if you've taken 2 or 3 tries, you pick the best of English and your best of math across all tests, and then you submit those scores. Some universities might want you to submit only your best score, but in a single test, right? Each university is different. Some universities are test optional. This means that students, can choose to submit the test scores if they feel it strengthens the application, but they are not required to do so, right? Test optional policies largely came into play during the pandemic when the tests could not be conducted everywhere easily. Then there are universities which are test blind, right? In these universities, what they're basically saying is that scores like your SAT and ACT are not considered in the admission process. So your test scores will not influence the decision-making process. Universities like the UCs are test blind. Now, some universities mandate that you take, either the SAT or the ACT. They will not accept your application without a test scores. So, and these are usually, the top few universities, which are very selective in their admission process. Universities like MIT, Yale, Georgia Tech, Dartmouth, Brown, and as of 2 weeks ago, even Harvard has made it, mandatory for students, applicants to take the SAT or the ACT. So the decision to take this exam depends on the policies of the universities to which you're applying. So if you already have a college list prepared, you will know whether you need to take this exam or not. But if you don't have a final college list prepared already, it might be a good idea to go ahead and take the SAT or the ACT. Because if you try and take it last minute, you might not achieve your potential score. Moreover, as an Indian student, it's always advisable that you submit your SAT or your ACT scores. That's, of course, if you have a good score, or unless you have a reason not to write the SAT or the ACT. Another thing to note is that the acceptance of the SAT and the ACT digital scores extends beyond the United States. Several other countries, like Singapore, Canada, Australia, even India, recognize and accept these SAT and ACT scores, Okay. Now let's look at the structure of the SAT exam first. The test is now a digital exam. You have the flexibility of using your own device. You can bring your laptop with the necessary software installed. The college board conducts this test on an app called the Blue Book app. You need to install this from their website on your computer, and you can attempt the test on your own laptop, but you do have to go to a center to take the test, right? Again, the app is very friendly. You can navigate between questions. You can access all the math formula in one place. It has a clock timer, which helps you keep time on your device itself. Earlier, you had a clock at the end of the room. The digital SAT is notably shorter compared to the ACT. The digital SAT lasts for about 2 hours and 14 minutes, right? Let's break down the exam structure. So there are two sections, English and math. And within the English section, there are two modules. Each module consists of about 27 questions each. So you'll be doing a total of 54 questions. You'll have 32 minutes for each module, giving you a total of 64 minutes to complete this section. So note this, that this SAT English section allows you approximately 1.19 minutes per question. This is a crucial figure, and we'll revisit this later when we are discussing the ACT. Right? Math also has two modules. Each module has 22 questions. So you're doing a total of 44 questions. You'll have 35 minutes for each module, which gives you about 70 questions to complete the math section. Again, note here that you will be given 1.59 minutes per question. Again, we'll revisit this score later when we are discussing the ACT. So it's important to know the time that you're allowed for this. Scores will range from 200 to 800 for each section, with an overall test score of 1600. So you'll get a score between 400 and 1600. Ideally, you should aim for a score above 1500. If you're planning to target the top universities, because this typically corresponds to around the 99th percentile, right? Okay. Let's get into the sections on what is being tested. In the SAT reading and writing section, your comprehension, language use, and writing skills are being put to test. You'll come across varying academic and literary passages, answering questions to gauge your understanding. The test segments include craft and structure, which focuses on vocabulary and text evaluation. Information and ideas, where you interpret various texts and graphs, right? Infographics, basically. Then you have expression of ideas, refining written expression. And then you have standard English conventions, which is basic rules of grammar, usage of punctuation and sentence formation and things like that, right? Then you have, in the math section, the content can be broadly categorized into 4 main areas. There's algebra, which is, linear equations, inequalities, system of equations, problem solving techniques. Then you have problem solving and data analysis. These are all topics related to data interpretation, ratios, rates, proportions, unit rates. Then advanced math includes quadratics and exponential equations, learning how to analyze and change equations. Then, of course, there's geometry and trigonometry, focuses on concepts like area, volume, lines, angles, triangles, trigonometric functions. Now, in the digital SAT math section, approximately 75% of the math questions will be multiple choice. 25% will be student-produced responses. That means you have to come up with your own answer and write it down, right? Another crucial point to highlight here is that the math section on the SAT is heavily weighted towards algebra. Almost 85% is algebra and other mathematical concepts, with only 5 to 7 geometry questions accounting for about 10 to 15% of the total portions. So very small portion of geometry, right? Now, the digital SAT is section adaptive. Now, what do we mean by section adaptive? You know, in each section, there are two modules that we talked about. Like in the English section, there's module 1 and module 2. Now, everyone gets the same level of difficulty in module 1, right? But how well you do on module 1 determines which version of module 2 are you likely to get, right? Now, let's say you do well on module 1. So say, you know, you're looking at the scores and we say, okay, you know, you've got 16 out of 20 correct, right? Out of your, in module 1, right? Now you will get a version of module 2, which is more challenging, right? But that's good because it is potentially leading you to a higher score range, like, you know, score range between 680 and 800, right? On the other hand, if you're scoring low in module 1, right? If you get a lower score, you will get an easier version of module 2, but you will get, it takes you to a lower score range, right? So say, for example, you're limiting yourself, you know, you're limiting yourself to a range of 320 to 440. You cannot go beyond 440, right? So what happens is doing well on module 1 is crucial, right? If you want to be able to have a shot at the 800, you have to do extremely well on module 1, right? If you have any questions, we can always take them up towards the end of the session, right? So I hope you understand what section adaptive means. Now let's talk about the ACT. In the ACT, you will have a total of 5 sections. There's English, math, reading, science, and there's an optional essay component. The English section allows you, you know, 45 minutes for 45 minutes for 75 questions. Now look at the time gap, right? We'll get into each one specifically a little later. The math gives you 60 minutes for 60 questions. You have for reading and science, you have 40 questions each, which need to be completed in 35 minutes each, right? Now scores for the 4 main sections will be scaled on a scale point of 1 to 36, right? And the average will determine of these 4 sections will give you your final score. Again, that is scored from a scale of 1 to 36. The optional essay is scored separately on a scale of 2 to 12. And that does not, that's not part of the score that you get from 1 to 36 for your entire ACT exam, right? Okay, now let's delve a little deeper into each section of the ACT, right? So the first section is the ACT English section, which is very similar to the grammar section of the English reading and writing section that we talked about, but this is specifically the grammar part of it, right? But there's a notable time difference here, right? You are allotted only 45 minutes to solve 75 questions, giving you approximately 36 seconds per question. You know, if you remember in the digital SAT, you got 1.19 minutes per question. So basically the ACT questions are very straightforward, right? They have a very direct style of questioning, but you have to solve many more questions in a shorter time frame. You have to be really quick to solve these questions. So what you need to ask yourself is that, are you someone who is okay with more questions in less time? Or are you someone who doesn't mind doing complex questions, but with more time? What are they testing in this section? So there's usage and mechanics, which is basically grammar, punctuation, sentence structure, you know, so on. Basically, one must know the rules of the English language and you have to implement them correctly, right? And they're also testing you on rhetorical skills, you know, one's big picture ability to make sure that the passage of writing flows, makes sense, effectively communicates a point. So they will give you various edits and you have to choose which edit kind of conveys what is the author trying to say. So it's basically editing skills on a larger picture. Next up is the ACT math section. Here you're given 60 minutes to do 60 questions, providing you roughly 1 minute per question. Now, if you remember in the digital SAT, you had 1.59 minutes per question. In the there is a significant reduction of time by almost 50 to 60%, right? What are they testing? Two broad categories, right? Algebra and geometry, trigonometry, right? However, the notable difference here is on the content distribution, right? Particularly with geometry and trigonometry. I mean, you have roughly 27 to 28 questions which come from the geometry, trigonometry section, which is almost 45% of your paper. On the digital side, this was only 15%, if you remember, right? So the digital SAT is very algebra heavy. ACT is equally spread out between algebra and geometry, trigonometry, right? This also means if you're somebody who is not very comfortable with algebra, you might want to look at the ACT, or vice versa. If you're very comfortable with algebra, you might want to stick to the SAT, right? Now, the third section is the ACT reading section, where you're allotted about 35 minutes to complete 40 questions, giving you roughly 52 seconds per question. The ACT reading section is very similar to the SAT. You know, they're basically testing similar skills within a comparable time frame. However, there are two major differences to note. Okay. Firstly, the structure of the passages differs. In the ACT reading section, you will have one long passage followed by 10 questions. You have a total of 4 passages, and these passages are taken from various genres like prose, fiction, social science, humanities, natural science, etc. Right? But in the case of SAT, you don't have long passages. You know, they have shorter passages to analyze, but the time frame that you get for both is the same. So you're going to have, 32, sorry, I think 27 short passages that you have to read, right? The second difference is that the digital SAT content is very dense. The questions are intricate, nuanced, requiring deeper analysis and critical thinking skills. If you compare it to the ACT reading passages and the questions are more straightforward and reasonably simple, right? The fourth section that you will come across is the ACT science section. Now, many students and parents often worry about this, thinking that, I'm not good at science, so maybe I shouldn't take up the ACT. Or, some parents will say, I'm wanting to pursue STEM. The students will say that you're planning to study STEM courses. Maybe you should take the ACT. Now, first of all, let's clear up this misconception. In the ACT science section, you won't be tested on your knowledge of any specific scientific concept. Instead, you will read science-based passages and answer questions based on them. It's similar to reading comprehension, right? When you're analyzing the passages which are being provided to you. So while, being familiar with the content can be advantageous, but it's not necessary. You will see 6 to 7 passages. Each passage is followed by about 6 to 7 questions, which gives you around, again, 52 seconds per question. And again, you'll get passages from various science genres. There'll be passages from physics, bio, chemistry. But you need to answer questions based on the information provided in the passage, right? And you cannot use any scientific knowledge from outside of the passage. Now, again, please keep in mind, on the digital SAT, they have included all the science-based passages and the non-science-based passages within the same English reading and writing. It's not that you don't see science-based passages there. You will see science-based passages on digital SAT also. But here they have, in the ACT, they have clearly divided it into 2 sections. The non-science-based reading is called reading, and the science-based reading is called science. It's not your knowledge of science that they're testing, right? Okay, now about the essay. The essay is an optional component. It is scored separately, like I mentioned, on a scale of 2 to 12. You are given one prompt and you're given 40 minutes to write your essay. Basically, it assesses your ability to analyze a complex issue, develop a clear perspective, and support your ideas with relevant evidence. While optional, it does provide colleges with an insight into your writing skills and critical thinking abilities, right? Now, choosing between the SAT and the ACT can seem quite daunting, right? But there are factors that you need to consider that will help you make a very effective decision. Firstly, consider your own strengths and weaknesses. The SAT tends to focus more on reasoning, critical thinking skills, whereas the ACT is more content based and has a direct style of questioning. Secondly, think about timing. The SAT gives you more time per question. That can be beneficial if you need extra time, to think through the problems. On the other hand, ACT is faster paced, more questions, less time. So if you're good at working quickly and efficiently, the ACT might suit you. Now, if you find math difficult, it might be better idea to take the ACT, right? Why? Because 50% of the digital SAT is math. Whereas on ACT, it's one of 4 sections, so only 25%, right? Again, time is a factor. The SAT is much shorter. It's 2 hours, 15 minutes. Whereas the ACT is almost for 3 hours. It's 3 hours long. Plus there is that 40-minute essay component, the additional component, right? So 3 hours plus 40 minutes versus 2 hours, 15 minutes. But having said that, I mean, one of the things you should keep in mind is that the SAT requires you to be able to do critical thinking. Students can either do it or not do it. You should have had a background of reading a lot of non-fiction text across various genres. You have to be able to do critical thinking. ACT is not like that. The more you practice, the better you get at it. That's not the case with SAT. So basically, you have to evaluate which format plays to your strengths and your preferences. It's best to take a diagnostic test for both the exams and see which one feels, more comfortable and of course gets you better results. Ultimately, the best test for you is the one that allows you to showcase your abilities effectively, right? Now, after this webinar, you will receive an email containing a registration link for these free digital SAT and the ACT diagnostic test from us. Please take these tests at your convenience. Assess your current standing and determine which test is better suited for you. These are, these are free full-length diagnostic tests. These are not the, shortened tests that you're going to see in most places. These are full-length tests. And if you want, you can book a free one-on-one consultation with us, and we'll be happy to take you through the report and help you decide which one is better suited for you. All right. I had mentioned that we will talk about the PSAT. What is the PSAT? It's a shortened version of the SAT exam. It's conducted once a year by various schools. If your school doesn't offer it, you can see which school in your city conducts the PSAT, and you can register there as a private candidate. The next question is, should you even be writing it? Is it even required? Pujita, can we do the questions? We'll have a Q&A session after this. We'll take up all questions then. So, should you be writing it? So you can opt to take the PSAT for multiple different reasons. Some students want to apply for some summer programs, summer school programs abroad. Some of those programs, especially the competitive ones, require your PSAT scores for admission into those courses. Some students will just take it to assess their current global standing in preparation. Where do they stand? But if you are a US citizen, then in grade 11, October of grade 11, there is a PSAT that happens, which is called the PNMSQT, which is it's a qualifying test for the National Merit Scholarship. So this scholarship opportunity is, especially for those accelerated students. So if you are someone who's a US citizen, your child is a US citizen, then you might want to take this up. for that additional scholarship. But is it mandatory? No, not at all. It's just a practice test. I know many schools are now mandating it, but it's not really necessary for, I mean, as far as, is it beneficial? No, the colleges are never going to see this test score ever. So you don't have to show it to them ever, right? Okay, let's get into our pedagogy. We divide our SAT training program into 4 main phases, right? We begin with the diagnostic test, which we call phase 0, to determine, which exam is the most suitable one for the student. This will make sure that you focus on the test where your chances are the greatest, the highest to succeed. In phase 1, we provide online tutoring classes, sessions, usually between 36 to 40 hours each for maths. I mean, for maths and English combined. Each session is for 2 hours, followed by assignments, which usually takes, 3 to 4 hours again. These sessions can be conducted in groups or one-on-one, depending on which program you're really choosing. Phase 2 involves practices and section tests. So every student is assigned a dedicated program coordinator or a mentor who conducts online meetings to assess their areas of strength and weaknesses. And based on these assessments, right, the mentor designs a personalized plan to address the student's needs. If required, they are directed back to classes, remedials are put into place, sometimes even extra one-on-one sessions with the faculty. So all that happens in phase 2. The students do start doing timed section tests also during phase 2. In phase 3, students focus on full-length practice tests. And we like students to do at least 10 to 15 mock exams before they go in for their first attempt. Of course, the mentor is there with them throughout to monitor their progress and adjusts their plan accordingly to ensure that improvement is happening. All these phases take place on our digital SAT program platform, where students have access to, all the comprehensive practice material and experience a similar style of questioning as in the SAT exam, right? Again, our programs that we offer, various permutation combinations to kind of cater to all the different needs. We have full SAT or ACT training programs. Like I said, you can do them in batch classes or individual one-on-one programs. But, when we take the diagnostic test, if we feel that a student requires only the math coaching or only the English coaching, those are too. For some accelerated students, we also have self-paced programs where they will get lesson videos, self-paced exercises, mock tests. It's basically giving you a comprehensive checklist to make sure that you haven't missed any aspect of the test. We also have programs where student can do only mock tests on our digital platform. So there are customized options available for the student based on what is their requirement, right? And again, in the past, our students have gained admissions to some of the top universities across the US, Canada, Singapore, and the UK with the scores that they have gotten. Again, students have achieved impressive SAT scores also, with the highest reaching 1590. Our average is, usually around 1450. Again, on the ACT, the highest score that we got was 36. With an average ranging from, between 30 and 36. Of course, these achievements reflect the effectiveness of our program in preparing our students for success in the standardized testing, and of course, helps them with the admissions to prestigious institutes worldwide. So, okay. No, we are open for question and answers now. If any of you would like to unmute yourselves and just ask a question, please go ahead. We'll spend the next 15 to 7 minutes. Or you could put up the questions in the chat box as well.
There are already some questions, Guneet, in the chat box.
Okay.
Starting with what APs means. Yeah.
So APs are advanced, advanced placement programs. What APs means is that you are basically taking a college level course. So for example, and again, APs might be taken for various reasons. So this is, okay, so for example, in your 11th and 12th, if you're studying sciences, but you want to go and, uh, take up a computer science program, but you don't have it as a subject in school, or you plan to take up economics, or you want to study economics, but you don't have that as a subject because you've taken up sciences. Now, a good thing to do is to take an advanced uh, placement program. It's an AP, is basically what you would have done in your first semester in college for economics. So you can prepare for that. You give that exam to say that while I have studied my sciences in school, I'm also very good at economics. Here, look at my score, how good I am at it. So I'm pretty much eligible for this course. It's basically done to, if you take it in grade 11, you would do it to boost your application for a particular course. Some students might even take it for, for example, they didn't do very well in their math exam in school, right? To show, but they are good at math. So then they might want to take, AP Calculus AB or AP Calculus BC to say that, hey, look at me, I'm actually very good at math and look at my score in calculus. But for some reason, I wasn't able to do it. So, sometimes to make sure your application doesn't get rejected right off, you do these things, and you would take it, like I mentioned, this exam happened once a year. So you would take it in the May of grade 11. So when you're finishing your grade 11, after that, you would take in the May exam to kind of, so that when your applications are going in at the end of grade 12 or the middle of grade 12, you can add your AP scores in that. So various reasons for taking your APs. Of course, if you're doing, you also get credits for this. So if you're, for example, some students will do their APs here to have lesser load in the first term when they go into, so there are certain courses that you may not need to do when you're going into your first semester. It saves you cost as well. I mean, the courses there are much more expensive, but also it reduces your workload in your first semester. So that's what APs usually are. Okay, how do we decide that we should take the SAT or ACT? Like I'd mentioned, the best thing to do is take a diagnostic test. And take one for the digital SAT, take one for, the ACT. When you do those tests, while you will not get a predicted score, you will understand the format of the test and you'll get an idea of which one do you think you can score better on. And like I had mentioned earlier, the SAT requires a lot of critical thinking, critical analysis. If you can either you have that capacity or you don't. It's not something that you can build. You can maximize your score, but sometimes we've seen that students, they'll come to a certain score and they'll hit a glass ceiling and they almost, you cannot go beyond that. So if you think you can do critical thinking, critical analysis, taking the diagnostic test will help you. I know the ACT sounds longer. It does have many more questions that you need to do, but it is more simpler. I should say the questions are slightly more straightforward style of questioning. So if your time management is not a problem, then if you can't do critical thinking, you should look at the ACT, because the ACT, the more you practice, the better you get at it. So the potential for getting a higher score is much more here if you can't do critical thinking, right? If that's not critical analysis, if that's not, looking at very dense content. I mean, while we are saying lesser, more time, we are talking 1.19 is not that much time also to read a passage and to answer a question. It is reasonably tough, right? So diagnostic test is the best way to go. Okay. Hello, will we clarify all the questions at the end of the sessions? Yes, I hope so. And if not, you can, block a one-on-one session with us and we'd be happy to sit and answer any questions that you have free of cost. There is no charge to this. We just do this as a, as a free activity. Will there be negative marking? No, there is no negative marking on the SAT, but with the new digital SAT, so the ACT, every question carries a single point, 1 point, irrespective of the difficulty. And there is a scale to which, this, like I mentioned, the number of questions you do is scaled on a scale of 1 to 36. The digital SAT, however, each question is weighted separately. So depending on how complex the question is, it's weighted separately. So which question you get wrong will indicate what score you get, but there is no negative marking as such. No more optional essay in the SAT, since no, so there is no essay at all in the digital SAT. There isn't an option to do it either with the new version. Can the student appear for both SAT and ACT and submit the more favorable report? Yes, you can. But the training for the two has become completely different. So a couple of years back, we used to have, with the old SAT pattern, we had a course which would train, you could train together for the, because the style of questioning wasn't all that different. The key concepts being taught were very similar. Now that has changed. So to be able to prepare for both cannot be done in a single program. You can do it separately, prepare separately for the digital SAT, prepare separately for the ACT, but it's a lot of time. I mean, what I think it takes, a student, usually it takes them almost 200 to 250 hours of work that the student needs to put in, right? The classroom training is only 30, 40 hours. It's the work afterwards that the student has to do, the practices, the bigger the gap, the more work they have to do. Can you do it for 2 exams? Would be my concern. But can you take both? Can you submit the score which you want to? Yes, that is done. The colleges do not differentiate between the 2 tests at all. How does this work for a kid studying in ICSE or CBSE board? Okay. See, the students who are studying in the IGCSE or the IB board are used to doing critical thinking. That is the way they are studying all subjects, history, geography, everything is done in that manner. So they are more conditioned for that. The CBSE and ICSE students, I've seen, if you're not an avid reader, you might find the writing, the English part reasonably complex. It's not that straightforward. Again, even for IB and IGCSE students, what they're doing in school in English and the SAT is vastly different. Here, I think what's more critical is, are you an avid reader? Have you read across all genres? Are you looking at nonfiction texts? Things that will help is if your child debates, if they do those kind of things, definitely sets you up for more success. Basically, you're looking at nonfiction texts in an analytical way, and you're being able to present your own opinion about it. So that skill helps. But do I see, I mean, some of my highest scorers actually have been from the CBSE and ICSE background. So is it a deterrent? No. In my experience, I've seen CBSE and ICSE students don't have a problem with time management. They tend to do better on the SAT and ACT. Somehow they have that rigor in them where they're able to kind of crack. They're used to studying in a particular way where they find it easier to kind of crack a system, which the ACT allows, right? You can continue practicing till a point where your score increases. Like I had mentioned, that's not the case with the with the SAT. You can either do it or you can't. So that's my personal opinion about this. Okay, if I missed my PSAT in my junior year, can I write it in my senior year and send my scores after admission? No, so you have to, if you're applying for the scholarship, the National Merit Scholarship, it has to be taken in the October of your grade 11 to be, and it's a qualifying test. It does not give you the scholarship. It's a qualifying test for the merit, the National Merit Scholarship, right? And there are a couple of rounds after that as well. If you are not a US citizen, the PSAT doesn't go anywhere. It's just a practice test for you. I hope I answered that question. Which one is better, SAT or ACT? Neither one. Colleges do not differentiate between the SAT or the ACT. The one where you can score more is the better one for you. They do not discriminate at all between the two. I mean, in India, we've heard a lot more about the SAT because SAT has a sales office. They have a team here that's going to every school. You will hear they're doing enough and more advertising. ACT largely is limited to the US. They've now started doing some canvassing with the schools and saying ACTs and other tests. In fact, they've started more with the colleges than they have. So a lot of colleges in India have now started accepting the ACT score as well earlier, whereas some, only, and I'm talking about the liberal arts colleges. Earlier, they accepted only the SAT. But as far as which one is better, none. I mean, they're both at par. How many months is our SAT course? Usually I would say keep about 4 to 6 months. It's shorter if you use your summer vacations. Ideal time to do it is after your 10th grade. The summer vacations is the best time to do it because you're never going to have this kind of free time. The summer of your 11th will largely go into looking at your college lists and things like that. So my recommendation is finish it off in your grade 11. 4 to 6 months is what I recommend. If you're doing it along with your school, it's going to take you a little longer. Also, I think one of the factors is the how big is the gap? How many mistakes are you making? So if you're, I mean, I've had students who've done it in a month. The entire person gotten a great score also, but I mean, that student came from a background where she was appearing for the NEET exam. She was also the best Tata Literary. She won the Tata Literary Award for her essay. So she was, she was already up there. So she didn't need to do a lot more work to bridge the gap. So it's all about the gap where the student stands. If they're avid readers, they're very good with English, they're fantastic with maths, they can finish it in a much shorter time. But usually we say keep 4 to 6 months is what I would recommend. Do we train for APs? Yes, we do. In fact, we take almost 13 plus subjects for APs. And you can always connect with us and we can give you the details of that. Will there be negative marking? No, like I mentioned, none. For non-US student currently in the 7th standard ICSE, which curriculum suits better if the candidate is willing to take the journey to USA university during 9th to 12th journey? Any preferred private schools recommended in Bangalore? Okay. Again, it's a very, let's take this question offline. It's a very, very subjective journey. Is one curriculum better for students? No, it's not. Both the curriculums, I mean, ICSE, CBSE, Cambridge and IB, each teaches you a different way of studying. The way you information process it is very different, but neither one has more advantage over the other. Each one is good and each one has its own strengths and weaknesses. I mean, I think the structure and discipline that ICSE and CBSE brings holds you very well when you're studying in college. The discipline that you learn, the self-discipline monitoring happens very well. But the content and the style of teaching of the IB and the IGCSE is also brilliant. Is one better than the other? No. Again, a very subjective space, depends on what are the things that make the student successful when they go to college. It's not the curriculum, it's the self-discipline and the motivation that they bring to the table. How much can they focus on what they have in front of them and not be distracted by the various things in their environment around them generally dictates success, not the curriculum that they're taking at all. Which exam is preferable to be given if a kid wants to pursue bachelors from abroad universities? And what about the scholarship scheme he can look for? Again, most places will not differentiate. I mean, I think colleges don't differentiate at all between the SAT and ACT, and neither does the scholarship. So if you're applying to the US, it's the same everywhere. Outside of the US, I think SAT, like I'd mentioned, is more popular. They have more sales, people everywhere. So colleges outside, there is a preference for the SAT more than the ACT. But within the US, it's the same. When should the prep start? Ideal. If I had my way, I would say start the English prep as early as grade 9, because that's the one place, they're testing what you've been reading, how you've been reading over the past 5-6 years. There's no silver bullet there. There is no quick fix. Maths, I know our kids usually do well with maths. Most Indian kids are pretty solid with their mathematical concepts. I don't see too much of a challenge there. Again, a very, very objective paper. So, if you're very easy to get the scores in. English is the big challenge. I would say start the English as early as you can, as early as 9th grade. Finish your English in 9th and 10th. Then do your math in the summer vacation of 10th. Give your exams. The first one probably in August, the second one in October. Be done with it so that you can spend your 11th grade onwards on academics. And believe me, your academic grades are far more important than any standardized test that you might bring in. So if your academics are not there, you could be getting a 1600 on your SATs. No college is going to look at your application. So 11th grade is, where the studies really start. So at that point, there's enough pressure. My recommendation would be to get this out of the way as soon as you can. Okay, my son, I hope I answered that question. My son sat for the PSAT grade 8 and scored around 1180 without any preparation. How to proceed to start training from grade 8 or 9 after grade 10. Like I mentioned, start with the English early on. That is going to be a challenge. The math, I would say, do not start before grade 10 until unless you're taking advanced mathematics in grade 10. Then you've pretty much covered 80% of the portion. Then you could start with your math portions in grade 10 itself. Otherwise, for a regular student, 9th and 10th is the best to do your English prep. Be done with it. There's no stress. It's very easy and there's very well paced out. Summer of 10th grade. Finish your math. Okay, how many times can I attempt for an exam in a year? In my intermediate, how many times can I write? You can write the exam as many times as you want. There is no limit on how many times. But like I said, we recommend 2 is a good number. 3rd, if you're aiming for a very high score. Don't do it more than that because colleges will start wondering why you're taking the exam so many times. But there are students who do take it. Can I give the SAT or the ACT in the starting of 11th and expect to get scholarship in the same year? And they say, yes, absolutely. The scores are, when you send in your applications and when you're applying for, I mean, they need your scores well in time before your applications go in, right? So you need to make sure that your scores are done and your final attempt has been taken before your application goes in. So you can. Also, the SAT score, I think, is valid for 5 years. So when you take it, you have a validity of 5 years. What is the SAT subject test? Is it the same as a digital SAT? So the SAT subject test used to be there earlier, but that has been discontinued now. It's not there. So if you want to take, I think the other alternative right now is the APs, the advanced placement exams. Yeah, how to apply for your APs. Okay. The registrations of the APs starts much earlier. I think start looking out September onwards. So between September to November is the registration. Some schools might allow for late registration only for some subjects. There is a late registration in March, but it does not happen. So you have to decide if you want to take the APs early on in your 11th. Make sure you register towards the end of the year because if you miss the registration, then there is no way to register later. And not every subject allows you for a late registration. Okay, if the kid is average in grades but able to score good marks in the SAT, what will be his chances to get a good uni and scholarship? Like I mentioned, academics is far more important when they're looking at your application. But like I mentioned, in the US, they have a very holistic way of assessing a student. So it's not just his academic scores, it's his academic scores, his test prep, his profile, what has he done beyond, right? And his essays, all of that put together in your application gets assessed. So, and we have kids who are, who I've seen who are brilliant in academics, but just cannot crack the SAT. They are stuck at 1200, 1300 and can't move forward. I've also seen kids who are very average in their school results, but are able to somehow crack the exam, right? So, because they've kind of understood the pattern of the exam and then they know what to watch out for and test taking skills takes them forward. So I've seen both ways, right? How to find out more about summer school courses? The best is to, connect with college counselors. Your college admissions counselors are the best people to help you with. And there is a team of counselors usually with most international schools who will be able to help you apply for these courses as well. There are independent counselors also who do just summer programs specifically. So we can connect, you should connect with them. Is it best to give the SAT in 10th grade or 11th grade? Like I had mentioned, English 9th and 10th, summer vacation after 10th, during your 11th, finish both your attempts. Can self-study be helpful? Oh, yes, absolutely. We have many, many students who are studying. In fact, some of the highest scorers are students who study by themselves because a large part, about 80% of your work is analyzing your errors and putting in the remedials required to get, to understand where are you making a mistake and what do you need to change and put into place to get a high score. And the students who score very high scores are students who are doing it by themselves because they're spending a lot of time on understanding what needs to be done. So like I mentioned, the self-paced course that we have for those students where they study on their own, where, if you don't need assistance, you can pretty much do it on your own as well. So analyzing the mistakes you're making, spending 80% of your time and effort on those mistakes that you're making, figuring out how not to repeat that error and then not, working your way down to almost a no error, that is the way to go. That's the best way to do. Is it advisable to take AP programs in grade 12? Yes, if you're wanting to do it for credits. A lot of students take their APs in grade 12 before they go abroad. It does help you in two ways, like I mentioned. You save a decent amount in course fees in your first semester. The second is because you get the credits for the courses that you have taken. Definitely, it makes your first semester easier. But having said that, if you're doing the IB curriculum, you don't really need to take any of the APs, and you do get credits in some colleges for the IB courses that you've taken also. So best to speak with the college counselor and figure out whether you really need to take the APs for grade 12 or not. I have 1 month to prep for my SAT. What can be done to get a good score? Completely depends on where you're standing at. My recommendation would be to go ahead and take a diagnostic test, see what you would need to do. And so I would say take up, go through if you have 1 month, go. If you have holidays, you can complete it. If you don't have holidays, I would say take the self-paced course, look at the answer videos, do the question answers, and then take on maybe a block of 10 hours or 20 hours with the faculty for doubt clarification to make sure that you're doing very specific work based on only the topics that you're kind of losing marks out on. So to compromise on time. Okay, so I think I've answered most of the questions here. If anyone has another question, please go ahead and you can unmute yourself or you can put it in the chat. These are some of the universities that within India that do take on SAT scores. And like I'd mentioned, if I have not answered any of your questions, please feel free to connect with us and we'll be more than happy to sit with you and answer any questions that we can. Super. Any more questions at all? What's the fee for the courses that you offer? Again, it varies based on what are you taking. It's for if you're taking only a set of 5 mock tests from us, it's as low as 5,000 plus taxes. And if you're taking the entire program, I think for this year, the fee is 1,40,000 plus 18% taxes. Depending on what course you're opting for, we have the entire range. And again, like I had mentioned at the end of this program, we also have a WhatsApp group. If you want to join that, please feel free to join that. We keep posting a lot of things on that group as well. So for how many hours do you teach per day? One-on-one SAT courses 1.5. Okay, start. So how many hours do we teach per day? We usually recommend that you do a 2-hour class. The best pacing is you do a class today for 2 hours. Between today and the next day, you can do your home assignments, which is usually 3 to 4 hours, and then you take another class again. And during the assignments, you're not only completing your work, you're also correcting your work. If you've got any questions wrong, you're looking at answer explanations, you're going back to look at revision videos, and you're assessing where you've gone wrong. You're making sure you are putting the remedials in place to make sure that that topic has been covered well enough. So there are students who are doing a one-on-one program and want to complete it in a shorter span of time. All depends on how much time you're willing to put in. If you're willing to put in 4 to 6 hours, you can have classes every day because the class is 2 hours, but the 3 to 4 hours after class needs to be completed as well. So on the one-on-one program, you can opt for classes, but that work has to be done after the class. Otherwise, just taking in theory without the practice does not go anywhere. If you're doing a batch class during the summer vacations, we usually have 3 sessions a week. That gives you enough time for theory as well as completing the homework and assessing. But like I mentioned, our admissions team can help you with the coming up with the customized course during school. When the school is going on and you're doing your training, we recommend not more than 2 classes, preferably on the weekend. So you have the entire week to complete your homework. So English on one day, math on another day. And then you have the entire week along with your school coursework that you're doing as well. So that gives you, good 5-6 days to complete the assignments. So it's very important that you do enough practices. Super. Like I mentioned, you can block a call or a meeting with us anytime that you want. So if there are no more questions, we'll wrap up today's presentation. I want to thank each and every one of you for your active participation and engagement. We've covered a lot of ground, and I hope you found this information insightful and valuable. Please feel free to get in touch with us to discuss any queries that you might have, and if you have any inputs, anything you think we should add, or any questions that you think we should kind of talk about, please do reach out. Your inputs are always welcome. Thank you so much for joining the session today. It was lovely interacting with all of you. I've put my number down there, so if any of you want to kind of connect at a later point of time, please feel free to do so. Thank you so much.
Thank you.